Have you ever been on a ride at Disneyland and just wanted to get out? In the middle of the ride, just get out and start exploring. As a kid, I always wanted to do this, and honestly, I still do even now. I vividly remember on Pirates of the Caribbean, as we would pass different parts of the ride, I would turn my head back to look behind me and was so fascinated with what I saw. The light fixtures shining down, the fog machines, the animatronics resetting, and strangely placed doors for the employees. It's one thing to know something isn't real, but to see exactly how that illusion is created, to see behind the scenes, is so intriguing. You've likely heard the term maintaining the magic before. It's one of the Disney park's core tenets, attempting to make the experience as immersive as possible. This went for not just the rides, but the entire park as well. Perhaps the most interesting strategy used for immersion is what are known as sightlines. Sightlines can be anything from a building being smaller than normal to appear further away, to an object obscuring a building behind it. Each land has its own distinct theming, and to keep within these themes, sightlines are used to ensure guests cannot see other parts of the park. An example of this can be found in Frontierland, where a large triangle-shaped tree is placed just in front of where the Matterhorn Mountain would be visible. In California Adventure's Cars Land, the rock walls are painted with different shades and saturations of tan to create the illusion that some of these rocks are further away than they actually are. There are dozens of examples of this throughout every Disney park, but sometimes things can go wrong. In 2017, the Tower of Terror was redesigned as a Guardians of the Galaxy themed ride, completely changing the exterior of the building. What used to be just another building visible from Buena Vista Street and Hollywoodland now stuck out like a sore thumb. It didn't fit with the theme. Plenty of people were upset about this, as it clearly wasn't thought out very well. It doesn't abide by their tenet of maintaining the magic. It breaks the illusion. When playing games as a kid, it's almost as though you're under some kind of spell. It was so enthralling to be within this vast, virtual space. Our primitive brains didn't really understand the inner workings of a game. Those blue pixels really were an endless ocean. Those low-poly models of trees and plants were alive and real. And the character? That was us. We put ourselves into the game. But games, too, are just optical illusions. They use the very same strategies as Disneyland to immerse you, to keep you within their boundaries. But games aren't the same as real life. They're different. When that illusion is broken, you don't just see out-of-place buildings or fog machines. You get a glimpse into an endless, empty world. A place where you aren't welcome. A place you don't belong. There's something unsettling about these empty rooms and the uncertain infinity just beyond those barriers. Yet, we still have a deep desire to go there. To break free. A game's goal, much like the Disney parks, is to immerse you. But how is that done? Similar to Disneyland's sightlines, one of the most important things developers have to keep in mind is the player's positioning. 2D side-scrollers or top-down games have the luxury of not needing to reveal the entire map at once. Things can easily just be hidden off screen where the player can't see it, and many objects and backgrounds are simply 2D images, meant to be viewed from a certain angle. The DS Pokemon games combined both 3D assets and 2D sprites to make a more tangible environment, while still keeping that classic Pokemon art style and charm. To create some depth of field, a brilliant strategy used in both games and animation is parallax scrolling. Parallax scrolling involves using multiple 2D layers, with the ones in the back moving at a slower speed than the ones in the foreground. This can make a fully 2D environment look as though it's 3D. Hollow Knight uses this strategy to great effect. While it's just full of 2D layers stacked on top of one another, many areas of the game are full of so much detail and depth. It makes exploring this deep underground kingdom that much more immersive. But real 3D games don't always have the luxury of forced perspective like 2D games. When in a 3D environment, the level of immersion is way higher, but the details have to match. Some open world games with massive maps will cut corners when it comes to details so as to not hinder performance. Minecraft, while a near infinite world, obviously can't render the entire map at once, as it would take a NASA supercomputer to be able to fully render enough chunks to see the horizon. So, to cover up the obvious world edge, it uses fog to hide where these chunks end. As you move around, chunks that get further away will disappear as newer chunks load in. The issue with this is the fog itself. It can be a bit immersion breaking when there's fog constantly 24/7, but also just being able to see more of your world goes so far. A massively popular mod that tries to remedy this is the Distant Horizons mod. It completely redefines how you see your world, and is something Mojang needs to include in the base game. Allowing you to see the far edges of your world does wonders for immersion. But what exactly is going on here? Distant Horizons uses an extremely useful tool known as LOD, or Level of Detail. By lowering the quality of textures and objects in the distance, it allows for more of the map to be seen without hindering performance. The mod essentially adds fake chunks along the edge of your world, without needing to change your render distance. This is how some truly beautiful games like Breath of the Wild let you see all the way to the far corners of the map. It's simply rendering an extremely low detailed version of those trees and landscapes. Something equally as important as making a game world feel real is keeping the player from breaking that illusion on their own. One way to do this is by creating barriers. The dream open world game would be the one that allows you to truly venture anywhere you'd like. A game that embodies the "you see that mountain, you can climb it" quote from Todd Howard. Realistically, no game's world is infinite, aside from maybe No Man's Sky, no matter how much it may seem like it is. If you venture too far, you will eventually reach the edge of the map. You are limited. Even games without barriers don't have a world that goes on forever. There are many different kinds of barriers games will use, but they tend to be divided into two types. The first kind of barrier is an artificial barrier. These are the abrupt walls or cutoffs where the player cannot go any further. Some will simply be death barriers, where after passing a threshold, you will instantly die, like in Halo when you touch water. And some games might have a short countdown telling you to return to the map, like in Battlefront. Other games might just have an invisible wall. Nothing works better than simply stopping the player in their tracks with one of these. It's the purest form of a barrier. They are definitely effective, but they cause a bit of a disconnect since they aren't very realistic. They tend to work best in games where immersion isn't the primary goal, which is likely why they're seen most often in multiplayer games, as there usually won't be much story or world building to interrupt with a death barrier or invisible wall. The second kind of barrier is the natural barrier. These are what I personally prefer, as they don't break the immersion, and will try and naturally keep the player within the borders of the world. The best natural barriers are the ones you don't even notice. This could be a steep mountain you can't climb, a sheer cliff where you could fall to your death, or broken debris blocking your path. Let's take a look at some examples. In Sea of Thieves, if you sail beyond the edge of the map, you will enter the Red Sea. The water turns to a blood red and will slowly break down your ship until you sink. Lore-wise, the Sea of Thieves is supposed to be this magical land hidden within a shroud, cut off from the rest of the world, so this barrier makes sense as to why and how it isn't known to the outside world. Similarly, in the Assassin's Creed games, the world takes place within a simulation in the Animus, allowing the character to relive their ancestors' memories. It makes sense that these memories wouldn't cover the entire world, so if the player strays too far, you'll desynchronize and die. These are death barriers that actually fit within their respective worlds. Perhaps my favorite of these barriers is in Subnautica. The edge of the map has a sharp drop-off, a continental shelf where it becomes an endless deep-sea void. Massive ghost leviathans will begin to hunt you if you swim out too far. And while it is possible to kill them, they will keep spawning and eventually you will die. This is one of the smartest ways of keeping a player within the map, by making the player not have any interest in leaving the boundaries or to actively drive them away with either fear or frustration. As someone with a bit of thalassophobia, or the fear of the deep ocean, I barely even want to go into Subnautica's shallow areas, let alone the world edge. At the end of the day, regardless of what kind of barrier is used, most of the time, if the game's world is interesting and engaging enough, no player will even want to test their borders. Most of the time. The reality is, it doesn't matter how well crafted these barriers are, or how immersive its world is. There will always be those who want to break free. But first we have to ask, how is it done? How can one break through those barriers? Well, sometimes it's nothing more than an accident. Developers may make mistakes and leave a hole to escape through and easily get outside. But typically it takes a bit more intent on the player's side. From glitches players find, to developers intentionally leaving openings to get outside the map, nearly every gamer has seen beyond a game's border at least once. I've spent plenty of time just looking for ways to escape a game's boundaries, and most developers know that there are people like this. Easter eggs are a staple of gaming these days, and a lot of them are placed outside of the playable game map, as the devs will anticipate players wanting to escape. In Halo 2, one of the most famous Easter eggs is in the mission Metropolis. Way on top of a bridge far above the playable area is the Scarab gun, a plasma rifle with infinite ammo that fires the cannon shots of a scarab. It's a super fun weapon the devs put in the game as a reward for curious players, but they certainly didn't make it easy to get to. There are a lot of different methods using skulls and whatnot to get up there, but probably the easiest is by luring this banshee from the start of the level all the way through the tunnel to then fly it all the way up to the top of the bridge. An interesting detail is how this isn't just a plasma rifle with the power of a scarab cannon, but rather it actually is the scarab cannon. Every time a scarab fires its cannon, a scarab gun spawns inside the cannon, shoots, then despawns. Another smaller Easter egg is in Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, where there are some locked doors on Tatooine you normally can't get through, but if you were to no-clip through these doors, you can actually find a model of Chewbacca, a cool find for those exploring outside the map. But sometimes, game devs aren't so keen on players escaping the map. In the Shrek video game, if you get out of bounds, rather than dying or simply falling endlessly, you will be teleported into a one-to-one recreation of a GameCube, with no way to escape. Cheats are disabled, and the only way to get out is by resetting your console. While it can be fun to simply explore beyond a game's borders and see if any Easter eggs are out there, it's mostly pointless, and just something players will do for fun, or if they're bored or curious. Unless you're a speed. There's no gamer that spends more time outside the map than a speedrunner. The ultimate test of skill, trying to beat a game or level as fast as possible, requires more than just being good at the game. In a speedrun, a common strategy is something called sequence breaking. It's where you will try and skip certain required steps to beat a game, whether that be single items or entire areas. It's where the term any percent comes from. If you can finish a game while only having completed a small percentage of the content, it would be considered an any percent run. This is where getting out of the map comes into play. Many games can be sequence broken by escaping the map to skip certain segments, and getting back in at a required part. I actually have a lot of experience with this, as I used to speedrun Destiny for quite a while. Finding ways to get out of the map and routing for a speedrun was easily half of the time spent when speedrunning. In fact, I spent so much time outside the map and exploring, it became just another part of the game. This entirely unintended way of playing became the backbone of how I played. It's strange that there's so many traversable areas outside the map. It's almost like you're meant to be out here. like you're meant to explore beyond these walls. But you're not. In GTA 3, there's a cutscene at the start of the game that takes place within a town that is nowhere to be found during the rest of the game. By getting out of the map, it's possible to see this town, but you can't walk anywhere here as there's no solid ground. However, there's a mod on PC that actually makes the street walkable, allowing you to see the town up close. There's not a soul to find here, just fake buildings and streets, something you weren't meant to see. A place once filled with life, then quickly abandoned. It's become known as the Ghost Town, and its eeriness has captivated people for years. These ghost towns or rooms are found in games everywhere. Some, like in GTA, are places used for cutscenes and nothing more, but some are more enigmatic. There are some rooms with no explanation as to why they're here. A remnant of the past, never to be realized. Whether test assets or cut content, these rooms all have something in common. You weren't meant to see them. It's an unnerving feeling to find these vacant rooms, void of life. Some of these rooms are just as detailed as places within the map, but disconnected. They are the epitome of the liminal space. A common description used for liminal spaces is the place you find yourself when you no-clip out of reality. Somewhere so foreign that it can't possibly exist within our own world, within our boundaries. But what makes it so foreign? Well, it's the same thing that makes it so unsettling. There's no sign of life. Loneliness isn't something you often feel when playing games. Not even in single-player games, as there are typically both NPCs and an entire virtual world to interact with. But these ghost rooms? Neither are present. There are no NPCs to talk to, and no world to explore, just an empty space. Abandoned buildings are creepy. It brings to mind how death and decay are an inevitable part of life. They allow you a glimpse into the past, to peer into the life of someone who came before you. But something far more terrifying than any broken down, forgotten building are the ones that look as though they should be full of life, but are empty all the same. These ghost rooms refuse to die, yet never even got the chance to live. Forever frozen in time, only to be seen if we break the rules, if we break our limits. But what if you pushed those limits too far? What if you were to look past that? Past the Easter eggs and the sequence breaking? Past these empty rooms and unused assets? What if you not only broke out of bounds, but kept going? Kept pushing? What is out there in that endless void? In The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, the entire kingdom of Hyrule has been drowned in the Great Sea. Using your sea chart allows you to map out all the islands you come across, ensuring you won't get completely lost sailing around this massive map. But by taking the camera outside the borders, you will quickly find that this sea is truly endless. It just keeps going. No sea chart can help you this far out, this disconnected from the rest of civilization. One slight course correction, and you will end up in a completely different place than where you started. But at least you still have the clouds to guide you, the open ocean to give you some perspective. That is, until you go beneath the waves. Dark Souls has a place known as the Abyss. A place so dark and twisted, it can corrupt even one's own mind. Not even the strongest will could fight against this corruption. Artorias was one of the 4 Knights of Gwyn, leader of Gwyn's army and renowned for his skill with a blade. But sadly, not even someone as strong-willed as Artorias could stand against the darkness of the Abyss. And so, it took him. transformed him into nothing more than a puppet. I think these vast chasms of nothingness just outside a game's map could do the same. The idea of getting lost in an endless abyss is worse than any sea or wilderness. You won't just get lost, you'll lose yourself. When you go too far, when you step into the void, the virtual space you've become accustomed to disappears. It's a sudden nothingness, a strange feeling that you aren't meant to be here. Some games have solid ground far beyond its barriers, allowing you to walk this infinite void of emptiness. But some games have nothing, just letting you fall into darkness. The idea of getting lost here is terrifying. There's no clouds, no ocean, just you and your thoughts. The only thing here to give you some perspective, to give you a sense of scale, is that small speck that is the map, fading away into the distance. And once that's gone, you truly are alone. It's simply within human nature to want to break boundaries, to explore the unexplored, to discover the unknown. But eventually, that curiosity brings us to a place of no return. The void is almost like a kind of purgatory. More unsettling than any liminal space, it doesn't just lack any sign of life, it lacks a sign of anything. But not always. What you're seeing here is something known as the Galaxy Pools. It is a typically inaccessible area within Destiny 2, but through certain means it's possible to get here. It's both an unused, empty place and an endless void of space. But rather than that eerie feeling you get from those other places outside the map, the Galaxy Pools are peaceful. Sometimes these ghost rooms and chasms of emptiness can be beautiful. It's largely in part to the immense skybox in the distance. It certainly helps the atmosphere when you aren't just staring into a black abyss. Places like these make me appreciate just how special games are as a medium. They can be truly mesmerizing worlds to get lost in. Simply getting lost in a game's skybox, if nothing else, can be relaxing. There's no distractions, just you and a breathtaking view. These worlds are just pixels, just data, nothing more than ones and zeros, and yet they can provide such a deep and potent sense of scale. The fact that a space so vast, so infinite, can exist just within this metal box, it's incredible. This boundless space just beyond the boundaries of the map can be terrifying, but I think it can also be beautiful. Disneyland actually has its own kind of barrier. It's known as the Berm. It's a massive 20-foot high dirt wall surrounding the entire park. Its goal was meant to keep all the sights and sounds of the real world outside the park and immerse guests within it. Funnily enough, they would eventually expand too far and were forced to build beyond the berm. They broke past their own boundaries. It's why in places like Galaxy's Edge you pass under a tunnel to enter. What you're passing through is the berm. Limits have shown that they will always be broken, and the unexplored will eventually become explored. It's just simply within our nature. There's a quote that I think relates beautifully to this idea of surpassing limits. George Leigh Mallory was once asked why he wanted to climb Everest, and he simply responded, "Because it's there." Gamers will always be curious as to what lies beyond those limits imposed on us. Curious as to just how far these virtual worlds go. Curious to see what is on the other side. As for myself, I know I likely will always find intrigue in finding cool and unique ways to break out of bounds, and see what mysteries there are to find. Games are an art form, different from any other medium. Movies or books can't be interacted with in the same way a game can. You can't watch a movie hard enough to find a detailed script or cut scenes. But games? These are fully realized and fully explorable environments, and they almost invite us to investigate every nook and cranny. If you look hard enough, you get to see the bones of what makes these games, the blueprints used to pull us in, the remnants of ideas and features lost to time, the seemingly infinite space they take place in. Games will keep coming out, and developers will keep coming up with new and unique ways of immersing us. But we will always be searching for ways to break that illusion. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like, as every little bit helps, and subscribe if you want to see more of me. As always, my name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.